Many consider Mars to be the new frontier, the next step in exploration and colonization for humans. Mars is a cold and distant planet who exposes trespassers to its wild storms, vastly different conditions, and unimaginable dangers every day. Hello, my name is James Fogel. I will be talking about all the tools and skills needed besides food, water, and shelter to survive Mars' elements. Beyond food, water, and shelter, what do you need to survive in harsh environments? Often overlooked as a pseudoscience, psychology and mindset play more of a role in everyday success than most understand. According to Chris Conaway, survival depends a great deal on a person's ability to withstand stress in emergency situations. Survival more often depends on the individual's reaction to stress than upon the danger, terrain, or nature of the emergency. So in the face of overwhelming odds, I'm only left with one option. I'm going to have to science the shit out of this. I realized early on that I was going to have to cut my arm off to get free, but there was also resistance. I didn't want to do it, he says. But by the second day, I was already figuring out how I could do it. What is significant about these statements? Each show an unfaltering will to live and supreme dedication to do whatever it may take, because with the proper mindset, anything is possible. Chris Conaway states, "What affects you mentally affects you physically. If you think that you can't survive, then you won't try to survive. A commitment or goal to live, refusal to give up, and positive mental attitude greatly increase chances for survival." A recent study by Harvard Health Publications describes the fight or flight response. When confronted with stress, the eyes and ears relay information to the amygdala, the emotional processor, who upon perceiving the signal as a threat sends a signal to the hypothalamus, sending a signal to the adrenal glands to release epinephrine into the bloodstream. This causes faster heartbeat, wider airways, increased sight and hearing. Something not addressed by many professionals is how fear affects decision-making. Fear is often a precursor to the fight or flight response, and often its stimulus. It has two capabilities. The increase of adrenaline can often overwhelm some people, freezing them, increasing their heart rate, slowing their breathing, creating tunnel vision, and slowing their decision-making. However, it can also mobilize us for action. There are many ways to avoid freezing up. However, two include keeping a positive mental attitude and playing out a what-if scenario. Kristen Conger states, in general terms, PMA combats your unconscious stress, allowing you to think more clearly and make better decisions. Matt Beecroft describes, playing out a what-if scenario in your head or being guided through one can help us prepare mentally for it happening in the real world. NASA thinks likewise when preparing for missions. At the end of June 2010, ESA's 6 astronaut candidates were thrown out of a helicopter, left to drift at sea, and abandoned under the hot Mediterranean sun. However, NASA also trains their candidates for specific missions, many of which require extreme temperature preparation. For this, NASA sends their astronauts to Russia, often on 3-day intervals. However, training is not enough. According to Chris Chambers in The Guardian, astronauts traveling to and living on Mars will experience 4 major problems: social isolation, confinement, loss of privacy, and lack of mental health services. The combined effect will cause astronauts to experience fatigue, depression, insomnia, anxiety, boredom, dysphoria, psychotic thinking, and much worse. This is a subject NASA, SpaceX, and Mars One have mildly addressed in the past. Currently, Mars One does not seem to address any of these issues. According to Chris Chambers, Mars One is either ignoring the psychological consequences of colonization or failing to disclose them, either of which will lead to potential mission failure situations on Mars. NASA is still adamant about training, and training for Mars One will take place in 3 phases. Phase 2 is the only phase that deals with psychological effects, and no information is given on how this might work. A quote from the site states, "Since these individuals will be unable to speak to friends and family on Earth face to face, a certain amount of coping skills are essential." Norbert Kraft, a NASA-associated psychologist's recent article in the Huffington Post describes how the most psychology associated with NASA are the behavior tests used for candidate selections. Kraft reports the constant reoccurrence of mission-jeopardizing situations that arose due to psychological, behavioral, and interpersonal aspects of crew performance, something inevitable to happen on Mars. While traveling to and staying on Mars, astronauts will experience a wide range of situations attempting to make them fail. Many overlook psychology as important to such situations. However, research shows that it is imperative that astronauts have healthy minds and thoughts in order to be able to succeed, as well as continuing counsel and supervision while on Mars. Once the astronauts are mentally healthy and have the will to survive, they need tools to enable this possibility. The ISS has a vast array of tools, including, but not limited to, wrenches, ratchets, sockets, screwdrivers, etc. No doubt similar tools will be placed on board future ships to Mars, as well as larger and more functional tools for surface work. Forget multi-tools. While vastly useful and used by many astronauts past and present, how about a tool to make all tools? An interesting thought, however odd, some are considering sending a large-scale 3D printer to Mars in order to facilitate the production of Martian tools. A well-designed 3D printer could allow astronauts to create whatever tool is needed for any job. Another vital tool that every astronaut will need on the surface of Mars is communication. Current astronauts on the ISS use basic handheld radios such as the Ericsson MP, Kenwood TMD-7, and Kenwood D710. Radios on Mars will take a similar approach and more than likely function as a multi-band walkie-talkie. Vital for communication between Mars and Earth is the accumulation and placement of satellites. Currently, there are 13 satellites orbiting Mars, 5 of which are active. The Mars Odyssey, launched back in 2001, is the oldest of the active satellites. For the past 15 years, NASA, ESA, and the Russian space industry have been preparing for communication between Mars and Earth. Perhaps the most expected tool to be used on Mars is the rover. A rover sent up with the first crew will be used for long-distance geological research missions. However, a rover will be more practical in later Mars missions when multiple habitats are built and transportation between them is needed. In order to sustain life and overcome injuries, one must have medicine. While people will be trained to help with medical support, a varied amount of medical tools and actual medicine is necessary in order to treat infections, etc. Prescription drugs, painkillers, disinfectants will all be vital to the astronauts and their continued survival. Finally, each astronaut will need to improvise an item of their own. The astronauts must make wise choices when trying to select a few objects for life. These tools, yes tools, whatever they may will be, will help astronauts stay grounded and be themselves. Donna Shirley of Mars Exploration NASA JPL would take a book and computer games.